Hello, TYF listeners, and welcome back for episode 3 of Finding Her Voice, our latest podcast by women who love film, about women who make film. In episode 3, we'll be tackling one of Mira Nairs' works, The Namesake, starring Kal Penn, Irfan Khan, and Taboo. The film tells a story about a young man coming of age and the way his journey parallels his parents who traveled from India to New York City. Beautifully depicted and touching on honest truths about the coming-of-age experience, it's yet another Nair film that demonstrates her immense talent. Once again, I'm joined by writer Alana Chase and co-editor-in-chief Gabrielle Bondi to talk about this film. But first, our starting question, as has become our tradition, what film directed by a woman are you most excited for to be released this year?
My most anticipated film is Tony Erdmann, which premiered at the Cannes Film Festival earlier this year. It's directed by Marin Ade, and I mean, frankly, I don't really know a lot about it. I just know that so much praise came out of Cannes for it, and I always like following the festivals and seeing which films get the most buzz, and that one caught my interest just because I briefly kind of paid attention to the themes people were mentioning and when talking about the film. So I definitely think it sounds interesting, and I'm kind of staying away from it because I want to experience it like the same way the Cannes audience did, like not knowing much about it. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, the response was kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
I know everybody was upset when it didn't win at Cannes, especially compared to what it did. Alana, what are you looking forward to the most?
I actually have two. One doesn't have a set release date yet, but it's Loving Vincent, directed by Dorota Kobiela, and it's actually kind of been marketed as the first fully painted film. Each frame is an oil painting on canvas, and it tells kind of the life story of Vincent Van Gogh.
So I didn't know that was directed by a woman.
Yeah, I had heard a lot of buzz about it, and when I was looking more into it and kind of thinking about, okay, what films am I looking forward to this year directed by women, I was so surprised when I saw that this was directed by a woman. So it just made me even more excited. And then there is also, you guys probably heard some buzz about it, American Honey. It's directed by Andrea Arnold, and Shia LaBeouf is in it. It's a road trip drama. It's actually the first film by this director to be set outside of the United Kingdom. So she's tackling outside territory, and it looks, not only does it look really interesting in terms of plot, it looks really beautiful aesthetically. So I'm excited for that.
Have you seen her other film, Fish Tank?
I have.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's one of my all-time favorites, and I think it's wonderful. So if American Honey is anything like it, I'll be pretty excited.
I'll be very happy with that, yes.
Well, mine's a little bit more mainstream now. I'm kind of upset about that. Mine's A United Kingdom by Ama Asante, who did Belle, and Belle was one of my big surprises of 2014. I didn't expect to love it, despite the fact that I adore period dramas, period romances specifically, so it was kind of in my niche, but I really walked into it kind of blind. So now, after I love that so much, I'm kind of just on, the fan train for this director, and I can't wait to see anything she does. And the fact that she lined up David Oyelowo and Rosamund Pike for her cast, two performers who have given some of the best performances in the last 5 years, it just clinches it for me. I'm very excited. But yeah, so there, as always, there aren't a ton of films directed by women to look forward to this year just because of the nature of Hollywood, but the ones that are being released seem worth seeking out. But to talk about the film we chose this month, The Namesake, I'm curious first, I guess, just what you guys thought about it, was because I'm assuming you guys both liked it more than How to Make an American Quilt.
Definitely.
I certainly did. I remember I watched it for the first time, I think it was last November, and I was unemployed, And I had a tendency of being found in my room just kind of in the dark watching movies a lot because what else would I be doing with my time other than that? And this one just left me so emotional and moved. And I remember loving it so much that I went to one of my local movie stores and I bought the DVD like in the next day. So I really adored it. So I'm curious to see what you guys thought.
Yeah, I loved it. That's why I suggested it for this month. Because I really wanted to revisit it. I saw it when it came out, like about 10 years ago, which means I was about 17. And I'll just say I watched movies from a very different perspective back then than I do now. So, you know, I I was dragged to see it because my mom read like a great review on it, and she's like, "I want to see this movie," and I'm like, "Oh, fine, I'll go with you." And I ended up being so. I mean, at the end I was like, "Wow, that was really good," and it stuck with me all these years later. And so now came the opportune time to watch it again and talk about it. And as I was watching it again the other night, I mean, again, I was just so moved in like so many different ways, and it's such a great story. It's so compelling. I love how it feels, how it's pieced together, and it's like kind of like it's. I don't know. It's just we'll get into it, but yeah, I love it. It's great.
Watching the film, not having seen it before, and actually not having read the novel until after I watched the film, I can say that it really holds up in both arenas, and it's just so charming. The way that it's crafted, kind of like a novel, the film is kind of set up that way. And it's really nuanced, and I know that we're going to touch on that later. But just every part of it feels really organic, and it feels like there's a truth behind it, and that someone really, I don't know, is putting their emotion into a story that's not only really important to be told, but is really fun to watch and really moving. Kind of the underlying themes and the threads of so many different stories of and in a family. It's just a lot of fun to watch, and it made me um, emotional in a lot of different ways. So I had a good time watching it.
Gabby, what was it like for you? Like, is it a different experience to watch it in your 20s opposed to in your teens? Because I feel like as a 20-something-year-old, maybe due to the part of my life that I was in, it might have resonated stronger because it is about that journey of self-identity. So I don't know if there's a difference between when you watched it when you were a teen and a much different point in your life to when you're in your 20s.
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, based off my memories of it, I always thought the story was more about Cal Penn for some reason. When I left it as a 17-year-old, I was thinking of Cal Penn. And now, as a 27-year-old, I was thinking of his mother and his father. And, and their stories resonated with me, much more deeply this time around. So I think, when you're younger, you're gonna relate to the American born kid who's like, your parents are kind of weird, but you respect them still, and you're so moved by them. And then now, as I'm older, um, because I'm over that kind of, I don't know, feeling that way, I guess, I I just really love the parents' story a lot more.
Yeah, that makes sense. I remember I definitely was moved by both. And again, I think maybe due to the point of life that I was in, I did respond to Kyle Penn's more. But now it makes me interested to watch it again and see it from a new perspective. So obviously this episode is kind of, we're talking a little bit about the idea of coming of age films and the stories that are in film about that kind of age of adolescence where you come into your own. And we were trying to focus a little bit on coming of age films directed by women telling stories about men. And they're, I guess, not too shocking. There aren't many. I went through a couple that I'd seen last year, and the biggest one I found was Eden, directed by Mia Hansen-Love, and it's about a DJ, and it follows him from his mid-teens up until his 30s. And that was maybe the most expansive film I could find that was similar to this in the sense that it really tracks his full growth. So, there are films directed by men about female coming of age stories, but mainly it's, men telling stories about men. So, do you think it's harder for women to tell stories about men? Do you think it should really matter in a storytelling purpose?
I mean, I don't think it's harder. I don't think it's harder for women to tell stories about men, especially coming of age stories. I just think they're maybe, a little bit more honest about it than men might be. Um, and I think that's just more of like a societal, egotistical kind of thing that you often see with, male directors. So I definitely think there's much more honesty and um, depicted in the film. They're not afraid to tackle certain subjects, and you see that, and I think it ultimately makes it more moving in the end. And from a storytelling perspective, in a perfect world, I don't think it should matter, but I think, you know, like part of our mission, well, thinking of our mission, to have more female directors, it is important right now because we get a ton of coming of age stories. It's nice to see something different. And if we know that women, well, most women can tell a slightly different story, why not give them the opportunity?
Definitely.
Definitely, I agree. And kind of going on top of the whole, there's more honesty and there's more truth when it comes from a female perspective. I think there's more vulnerability as well. And this kind of ties into the film that we talked about in our first episode, Advantageous. I think that film couldn't, and that story couldn't have been told from the perspective of a man. A man couldn't tell that same story, but in this situation, I think that a man could have told the story, but it's more honest and it's more open when it's coming from this female perspective. And I think that she just did a really wonderful job with it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a part of me that does think, I think men could tell a perfectly fine story about a female coming of age story and vice versa. I think women, I don't think women need to experience being a teenage boy to understand, the angst that comes with that. I do think having experience in certain aspects of life probably will help you with insight. But I think as a storyteller, it's your job to, find those hidden truths and to put yourself in other situations to like tell that story and to celebrate it. I don't think directors should only be telling the stories that they personally know or have experienced. So I definitely think that women should be able to tell these male coming of stories more often. We need a Perks of Being a Wallflower by Gillian Armstrong. I think we just need those stories told through that perspective, but I don't see Hollywood agreeing with us very soon. So moving forward, this story is really interesting because it doesn't go along with the typical coming of age conventions of kind of telling a short story or it's through a short period of time. This really does span a number of years. And like Gabby said, it's not just about our lead character, it's about the parents too. And everything that the parents do and everything they did in the past strongly influences our lead. But she was mentioning before the podcast began, and it's something I didn't really pick up on, if I'm being quite honest with you, when I first watched, that it goes from being an immigrant story to being one about somebody finding their identity through their parents and on their own, to being able to follow in your parents' footsteps and not really think that's a bad thing, to embrace your own heritage and where you came from. So I was wondering how you guys felt, or if Gabby, if you wanted to elaborate maybe on that structure of the film and how it resonated.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I really noticed was that it comes full circle in a really interesting way. The last scene we get with Cal Penn's character Gogol is him reading the overcoat on the train, just like how we saw his father in the beginning reading it on the train. And because the whole time in between, I was thinking how Gogol wasn't anything like his father. He was so different. I mean, he's American. He does treasure. I mean, he learned to treasure his values later, but at the end, he wasn't the same person as your father. And I think you hear this a lot, how like, oh, you end up being just like your parents eventually. And the thing is, at the end, Gogol isn't just like his parents. But I still like the idea of him being in the same place as his father at the end. So that was really interesting to me, just that whole full circle effect. And yeah, and I think what also makes this interesting is like the coming of age story is expanded upon in a way that um, it's not just Gogol's story, it's his parents' story. And you see his sister and you see his relationships, and there's all these little different pieces that make it up. So it's not necessarily just like one thing, it's everything. And it begins as an immigrant story. It begins as like his mother trying to learn how to live in this world, and his father uh trying to give him this new life, and accepting that your kids are American, they're going to be the way they are. So um yeah, I mean, I definitely think that that's what makes it interesting, is that it's just not about Gogol, it's about everyone. And eventually, and that's what makes you who you are, everything that surrounds you, everywhere that you came from. So yeah, I like
Mhm.
that.
And that just reminded me of one of the lines that was in the film when Gogol is reading a book and he stumbles upon the line from, I know one of my favorite writers, Dostoevsky, um, who says, "We have all come out from under Gogol's overcoat." And in that context, he meant that a lot of Russian literature came out from this story, but in the context of the film, like it was really kind of touching. All of these different stories came from that one moment where his father is reading that book on the train, and it kind of sparked all these different stories. And I definitely agree with you that it's not just about one person coming of age. It's kind of a story about everyone becoming themselves and, you know, kind of nestling into what life is like.
It
Yeah,
also,
I'm sorry.
Abby.
No, I mean, yeah, in a sneaky way, it's also like a bit of a coming of age story for Ashima, his mother.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing her from becoming a young woman to a wife to a mother to, eventually a widow, and returning to her roots. I mean, you see her complete journey as well.
By the way, pure devastation when his father, I guess spoilers for people who haven't seen the film, but I don't like doing spoilers for films that came out years ago. But I love Ifran Khan quite a bit. I just love watching him. I love his face. So I was devastated when he dies in the film. But I was gonna say about the whole, she has a coming of age story too, is that the film kind of subverts the coming of age narrative and the tale itself, because it kind of proves the point that there isn't really a coming of age moment in your life. You're always kind of growing into yourself. You're always developing into a new or a more or like a wiser version of yourself, and everything changes. And I think that's kind of really special to hit on, because not that everybody walks away from a movie assuming it's the truth, but I do think there's this idea that like once you grow out of your teens, like, you're the person you're going to be for life, and you have everything figured out. So I like movies like this that kind of show that it's an ongoing process of learning who you are and what you're meant to do and what that means to people around you. So it's just another reason why I just adored this film.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Gogol still doesn't really, understand where he's at or what he, means to do. He might have his career figured out, but emotionally, I mean, his wife just left him for another man. His mother's leaving, and now he's kind of a little bit set adrift, but I think the memories of his father kind of ground him in a way that makes him feel like secure enough to like, okay, I can handle whatever's next.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I didn't know if you wanted to touch on now maybe the thoughts that you'd had coming from the film.
Oh yeah, about the like the emotional nuances and like subtleties.
Yeah.
Yeah, I there's that one scene that I love in when they're where Ashok and Ashima are at the Taj Mahal, and he asks her, "Oh, why did you choose me?" And she's completely honest with him. And he kind of is a little disappointed, and then she's like, "Well, you want me to say I love you like the Americans?" And he smirks, and I think I mean, light it's a funny scene, but it's packed with so much love. Like you could tell that she loves him, and she without her actually saying it to him, like that they really love each other. And it's moments like those that are like, you know, interspersed throughout the film, and they're so beautiful and they're so subtle, and it doesn't have to be so blatant and in your face. It's kind of like how life is, like, not every moment's a grand gesture. Sometimes it's like these small little moments that, you know reassure you that someone loves you, or that you have someone there. So I think it's I don't know, Nair's kind of like little specialty I find in her work, that she can create these really beautiful, nuanced emotions without, just from the performances and from the story itself and her direction, she gets it.
I agree. I think that, and even kind of in the same vein as that, but maybe in a different emotion, I guess, is when Gogol introduces Maxine to his family. There's a lot of different emotions uh, flowing through that house and between each person. And I think that it is a specialty of hers to kind of get that so right that there's a lot of love and there's tension and nervousness and cultural barriers, and it makes for a really raw kind of viewing experience. I thought that it was charming and it was funny, and it makes you anxious to see what's going to happen. And I think there was a lot of different layers to it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you felt the awkwardness and
Yeah.
like kind of like how off it felt, and you're just like, and the little side-eyed like moments, that you
Mhm.
see them make. And then kind of like in a complete opposite way, when he meets his wife, which I think her name's Moshima, is that
Mhm.
right? She the first scene when they're on that like first date, and it's just how like seductive and like sexy she looks with her
Yeah.
cigarette. I'm like, I mean, that scene just like is, I mean, it's the opposite of subtle. It's like this woman is hot and she knows
Mhm.
it. And it's a very interesting scene to watch coming from this film, because it feels like so different from the rest of it, yet it fits in there because that character had always kind of stood out, amongst the rest of the characters. And here you see her on full display, and you see Gogol's kind of like lust for her immediately.
Yeah, definitely. It is definitely something I loved about the film. I mean, like, I'm just gushing at this point. I'll just like write a list and attach it to the post about why I love this film. But in a broader sense about, emotional nuance, I try not to make blanket statements. I'm definitely guilty of it. But I do think that female directors, if they get anything right, like above a male director, is I do think they understand relationship nuance and the emotional connection that people have. And I think they get the complexity of emotions in a way that I don't like. I don't know if it's just that, male directors don't grasp it, or if they just don't care to showcase it. Because, in the last year I've seen films like The Dish and the Spoon by Alison Bangle that understood female anger in a way that I have never seen demonstrated on film, and it really connected to me because I recognize it's a part of it. There's films like Melanie Laurent's Breathe, which understands the kind of toxicity of female friendships that can happen when one's manipulating the other. And then you see films like this by Mira Nair, where it understands family at such like an emotional core, and how they're always there, and it doesn't always have to be a big moment, and the interplay between father son, father mother, they're different, but they're not different in ways that are obvious. And I just think that those are the movies I'm interested in seeing, where it's big in scope but the emotions are internal and they're small, and most importantly they're recognizable, especially in a coming of age film, where that's kind of the purpose, is that you want people who are watching to relate or to think we've gone through this moment. So yeah, just add it to the list, I guess. It's just another reason why everybody should see this movie and why I should definitely be catching up on all of Nair's work,
Mhm.
because I haven't, and I'm really ashamed of myself about that. So that's on my to-do list.
It's on mine as well.
Yeah, same here.
Definitely.
I'm definitely looking forward to her new stuff as well.
And yeah, she has one coming up this year with Lupita Nyong'o and David Oyelowo, another superb cast. So I think she's a director that maybe goes a little underrated, despite the fact that she seems to consistently make films that rank among the best.
Mhm.
So it's just another example of sexism in Hollywood, which I guess is the purpose of this podcast, to highlight those voices. But is there anything else you guys took away from this film that you guys wanted to mention that perhaps I didn't write down?
Um, I think one thing I wanted to touch on was just like the depiction of India that I found interesting. Because I think the last movie I saw set in India was one of the Marigold Hotel movies.
Oh, me
and
too.
Me
and
too.
so and that we all know gives a very what's the word for it? A very not safe depiction of it, but like
Kind of an elitist depiction of it, though.
like a romanticized
Yeah.
kind of. But I also think Nair kind of romanticizes India too in a bit, but she romanticizes it in a very familiar way, in a more realistic and in touch with the culture and the values and everything. And that's one thing that I mean I one thing too when I came out of it when I first saw it was I fell in love with the Taj Mahal after I saw this movie. I have like a few Taj Mahal things in my room because I absolutely am kind of obsessed with it because of it. Just the way she filmed it, it was so beautiful. Like it was a little love letter to that, you know, wonder of the world. So that's one thing too that I really liked was just her depiction of India and her culture. And I think if it wasn't for the fact that she was Indian, she probably would not have filmed it as lovingly as she did.
Yeah, and do you think actually that might have, I guess this might be a good point to mention. Do you think if those weren't words, I apologize. Um, if this had been a white director who had done this, or somebody who didn't grow up, or who isn't, doesn't have that heritage, or doesn't share the heritage of maybe the people in the film, do you think it would have come off differently? Do you think it would have been a Best Marigold Hotel situation where you kind of exoticize the um, the landscape a bit? Like, because that's something I guess we should definitely talk about too, is how women of color influence the stories they tell as well.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it could have been another Marigold, you know, um, kind of depiction, or if it was a male director or white male director, especially. Even like think of Slumdog Millionaire, which I mean
Yeah,
showed the bad parts of India, but it still kind of had this music video uppity quality to it at the same time.
And it also kind of only showed the bad aspects, which I think is the problem with a lot of these films set in India or in many places in the world. Is you either show the worst aspects or you paint it as it like this exotic land where like women in their 60s go to find themselves again.
Yeah. I think that if it was a white director or, anybody that either hadn't been to India or wasn't really familiar with it, I think that they might have just gone the lazy way of depicting it and kind of been like, here's the Taj Mahal, here's markets where you can tell that it's India or, some kind of Indian-esque area, and kind of just been like, you can tell it's India, and then not really going into, and I hate to use this word again, but the nuances of that culture and the fact that it's not just one thing or the other, it's many things.
Yeah, definitely. The last minute thought, but I thought I should actually point. But yeah, no, so obviously there's many, many reasons why you should all watch this movie. I believe it's on Amazon Prime to rent.
No, it's not.
It's not?
Oh, wait, no, it is to rent, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
To rent.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I thought you meant, like, Prime as in, like, yeah, never mind.
Oh, no. That's fine. I remember because I rented it when I first saw it, obviously before I just went and bought the movie. Probably should have just done the first time. But yeah, so I don't know if there's anything more to add. I think we really covered a good chunk of it.
Right. I mean, there's so many layers to this film, and, like, frankly, I think we could talk about it for hours, but, I mean, that just
We
defeats the
don't
whole
know if people would
purpose.
listen for hours.
Yeah, well, not even that. I mean, we want them to experience the film, like, on their own as well, too,
Yeah.
and kind of come out with something, with their own thoughts. So, yeah, I mean,
I'm really sorry then that I spoiled what happens
well,
to
you
the
know what?
father.
This is a film that spans, like, decades. Someone's gonna die.
Yeah.
I mean, it's part of life. So, it's not really a spoiler.
Life, deal with it.
Oh, Lord. Everybody die.
Yeah, so I'm so glad because this definitely fell in line more with my like feelings of advantageous than How to Make an American Cult, which just also is too long of a title to say casually, so I need to come up with like a shortened version of it. But but yeah, so I'm excited that you guys both liked it. It was funny that me and Gabby had both seen it prior to doing the podcast, because I think that goes against a little bit what we were talking about. But there's just so many good films that we want to talk about on a monthly basis that it's actually becoming troubling, because monthly basis definitely works better for us, meaning that, we have things to do and we can't just do these every 2 weeks and guarantee that we'll have them out. But I'm also coming up with so many movies that I want to talk about that limiting it to a month is also becoming a bit of a problem. But make sure to tune in to next month's podcast, which I'm really excited about because it's our version of a back-to-school special type of thing. We'll be talking about movies that depict friendships between teenage girls, volatile but caring in their own way. And specifically, we'll be talking about Celine Sciamma's, right?
Yeah.
Sciamma? I wrote a note in my hand so I would not mess up this name. Superb Girlhood, which has the best use of a Rihanna song in any film ever. It might be the best use of a Rihanna song, including Rihanna just singing it live. Just amazing. And I don't believe Gabby or Alana have seen this film,
I have not.
so I'm wicked excited to see what you guys think. I'd love to add possibly one more if we have the time, but we'll kind of play that part by ear. I definitely want to talk about how female friendship is depicted in film, because it's not always done well, or anything that depicts us as human.
Exactly.
Being a teenage girl is maybe the hardest thing in the world, so I kind of give it a pass sometimes. But I definitely think there's better ways to do it than, girls fighting over a boy, because boys suck and who cares. But I'm kidding, obviously. Summer. Um, but so, make sure you guys join in. It can be our own version of like a book club, but it's movies. Watch the film in the next month. Send us questions that you think we should cover. You can find us on Facebook at TYF Official on Twitter, and I'm at Allison AJ. Gabby and Alana, where can we find you?
I'm at Gabrielle Adele on Twitter.
And I'm at Lane Not Lawn on Twitter.
Okay, well, great. Thank you guys again for joining us for this month's episode. Go watch The Namesake, and happy watching. Have a good one.